the small town of Darden, Tennessee, the disappearance of a young woman named Holly Bobo would forever alter the lives of her family, friends, and the community at large. Holly, a 20-year-old nursing student with a bright future ahead, was abducted from her home on April 13, 2011. What followed was a tragedy that spanned years, filled with confusion, hope, and devastation. It became one of the most high-profile missing persons cases in Tennessee's history, culminating in a series of legal battles, complex investigations, and years of heartache for those who loved Holly. The case would go on to captivate not only local communities, but the entire nation. In a case that seemed to grow colder with each passing year, Holly's family clung to hope, believing that someday they would see justice served for the disappearance of their daughter. Holly's case became a dark reminder of the reality many families face. When someone you love is taken away, the search for truth can feel like an endless journey. What started as a missing person case turned into a gruesome tale of violence, manipulation, and heart-wrenching loss. As law enforcement and investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the mystery of what happened to Holly Bobo, they uncovered a story much darker than anyone could have imagined. The people involved were not strangers, but familiar faces, and the investigation would take many twists and turns before the full truth came to light. Over the years, the case would become a symbol of both hope and despair. Holly's family fought relentlessly to uncover the truth, enduring the unimaginable pain of never knowing what happened to their daughter and sister. Yet despite their perseverance, the case remained unresolved for years, with every lead either leading to dead ends or raising more questions than answers. The haunting mystery would evolve into one of the most expensive and difficult criminal cases in the history of Tennessee. At the center of this case were the Bobo family's heartbreak, the tireless work of local law enforcement, and the eventual involvement of the state and federal authorities. Along the way, the investigation encountered challenges of corruption, misdirection, and the constant struggle to keep hope alive in the face of overwhelming silence. For every step forward, there seemed to be the steps backward, and for the Bobo family, their world was forever changed by this painful chapter. In this video, we will take a deep dive into the shocking case of Holly Bobo, examining not only the details of her abduction, but also the emotional and legal roller coaster that her family experienced. We will unravel the complex layers of the investigation, the twists and turns of the trial, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice that spanned nearly a decade. A bright future stolen. Holly Bobo's early life and disappearance. Holly Bobo was born on October 12, 1990, to Karen and Kirby Bobo in the small, tight-knit community of Darden. Holly was known for her sweet and caring nature, with dreams of becoming a nurse. She was studying nursing at the University of Tennessee at Martin when her life was tragically cut short. Holly's family described her as someone who had the world ahead of her, someone whose kindness and warmth could brighten any room. On that fateful morning of April 13, 2011, Holly's life was turned upside down. She was preparing for another day at college when, around 8 a.m., she was seen by her brother Clint, who noticed her speaking to a man outside their house. The figure appeared to be an unknown assailant, but no one knew at the time how profoundly this moment would change their lives. Moments later, Holly was gone, leaving behind only traces of her struggle. Her brother, fearing the worst, immediately called their mother, Karen, who then contacted authorities. As law enforcement began their search, they were confronted with a variety of conflicting information. Some witnesses claimed to have seen Holly, while others suggested that she had been forcibly abducted. There were signs of struggle, but no immediate evidence of where she had been taken. The case quickly became one of the most intensive missing persons investigations in Tennessee's history. Every lead, no matter how small, was pursued, but the clock was ticking, and Holly remained unaccounted for. The community came together, organizing search efforts and hoping for Holly's safe return. But despite the incredible amount of resources poured into the investigation, the answers remained elusive. As weeks turned into months and months into years, the possibility of finding Holly alive began to fade, but the hope for justice never wavered. Every detail seemed to add layers of complexity to the case, and those who followed it were left in the dark about what had really happened to Holly Bobo that morning. The investigation, uncovering the truth behind the disappearance. The investigation into Holly's disappearance was both challenging and highly publicized. The Bobo family endured the emotional roller coaster of false leads, dead ends, and legal battles. In the years following Holly's disappearance, investigators interviewed numerous potential suspects, analyzed forensic evidence, and relied heavily on tips from the public. However, the most crucial breakthrough came in 2014 when a major suspect was arrested. Zachary Adams was a name that would forever be linked to Holly Bobo's abduction. He was arrested in 2014, 3 years after Holly's disappearance, under charges of kidnapping and murder. The arrest came after new evidence emerged pointing to Adams, including his history of violence and possible connections to Holly's abduction. At the time of his arrest, Adams denied any involvement in Holly's disappearance, but law enforcement had enough evidence to proceed with charges. The arrest of Zachary Adams kicked off a series of legal proceedings that would span several more years. The case was further complicated by the involvement of other suspects, including Jason Autry, a man who had reportedly been involved in the crime. Autry would later agree to testify against Adams, further complicating the case. The legal battle became a spectacle as Adams and his defense team fought the charges, and the prosecution pushed for the truth to be revealed. The trial, the legal fight for justice after years of legal wrangling. The trial of Zachary Adams finally began. The courtroom was filled with emotion as Holly's family and the community once again had to confront the horrors of that fateful day. The prosecution presented a compelling case, laying out a series of damning evidence that suggested Adams was directly responsible for Holly's kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. The defense, however, argued that there was not enough evidence to convict Adams beyond a reasonable doubt, raising questions about the reliability of witnesses and the validity of certain pieces of evidence. The trial was long and drawn out, with both sides presenting their arguments and attempting to sway the jury. Throughout the proceedings, Holly's family sat in the courtroom, trying to find peace in the midst of the chaos. For them, the pursuit of justice for Holly was not just about holding someone accountable, it was about finding closure and putting an end to years of suffering and uncertainty. In 2017, the jury convicted Zachary Adams of first-degree murder and kidnapping, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The conviction brought some measure of relief to the Bobo family, but the story was far from over. There were still many unanswered questions, and some believed that justice had not been fully served. The involvement of other parties, such as Jason Autry, and the ongoing legal battles surrounding the case made it clear that there was more to the story. The ongoing struggle for justice and the final reveal despite the conviction. Holly Bobo's case continued to unfold in unexpected ways. In 2020, Jason Autry's conviction was overturned, and he was released from prison, further complicating the legal landscape. This twist in the case reignited public interest and once again brought attention to the disturbing details of Holly's abduction. Today, Holly's family continues to fight for justice, holding on to the hope that one day they will have the answers they so desperately seek. The legal battles may have brought some semblance of closure, but the emotional toll of the case is something that no verdict can ever undo. Conclusion: a family's heartbreak and the quest for truth. The story of Holly Bobo is a tragic reminder of how quickly a life can be stolen and how the search for justice can take years. Her family, devastated by her loss, has remained steadfast in their pursuit of the truth. Holly's case stands as a symbol of resilience and the unwavering fight for justice that continues to this day. As the investigation and legal proceedings continue, Holly's legacy lives on. Her family, along with law enforcement, is determined to ensure that her story is not forgotten and that the truth is finally revealed. Through their pain, they have become advocates for justice, hoping to prevent other families from experiencing the same heartbreak. In this video, we have uncovered the complex layers of Holly Bobo's disappearance, from the emotional toll it took on her family to the lengthy legal battles that followed. As we reflect on this tragic case, we are reminded of the importance of never giving up in the search for justice, no matter how long it takes. Part 1. The Disappearance, a day that changed everything. Morning of April 13, 2011, began like any other for Holly Bobo. At just 20 years old, she was a promising nursing student, balancing her studies at the University of Tennessee at Martin with her job at a local hospital. Holly lived with her mother, Karen Bobo, and her brother, Clint Bobo, in the small, quiet town of Darden, Tennessee. On that fateful day, Holly woke up early to prepare for her classes and was getting ready for her morning routine when everything suddenly took a turn for the worse. Holly's brother Clint was the last family member to see her before she disappeared. Around 8 a.m., Clint was getting ready to leave for work when he saw Holly standing outside near the front of the house, speaking to a man in the yard. He later described the man as having dark hair, wearing a camouflage outfit, and standing near the trees about 30 yards away from the house. Clint initially thought it was just an acquaintance of Holly's or perhaps a friend from the area. But what he didn't realize was that this would be the last time he would see his sister alive. According to Clint, he went inside to get ready, and as he was leaving the house, he glanced out the window and noticed Holly still standing near the trees with the same man. A few minutes later, he left for work, assuming everything was normal. However, when he returned home that afternoon, he would be faced with a nightmare that no family member should ever have to endure. When Clint arrived back at the house, he immediately noticed something was wrong. The front door was slightly ajar, which struck him as odd. Holly's car was still parked in the driveway, and there were no signs of disturbance or struggle in the house. It wasn't until Clint went to Holly's room and discovered that she was missing, with her purse and cell phone left behind, that the horrifying reality set in. He frantically called his mother, Karen, who immediately contacted the authorities. The moment Holly Bobo's family realized she was missing, a sense of panic and confusion gripped their hearts. The young woman with her whole future ahead of her had vanished into thin air. Where could she have gone? Why would she leave without any of her belongings? And most importantly, who was the man seen talking to her outside that morning? The initial search, a community comes together. What followed was a community coming together in shock and disbelief. Law enforcement was immediately called to the scene, and the first search efforts began. The Darden Police Department, along with Tennessee Bureau of Investigation (TBI), started combing the area, but there were few leads. Holly's family and local volunteers joined in the search, walking through fields, forests, and nearby rural areas to find any trace of the missing nursing student. The authorities, in the early stages of the investigation, were left with only a few pieces of evidence. Holly's phone was found on the ground just outside her home, and the last known sighting was Clint's report of the man talking to Holly. As time passed, more people became involved in the search, but the fear of the unknown quickly turned to suspicion. Was this a simple case of a young woman running away, or was something more sinister at play? As the search expanded, Holly's family continued to hold on to hope. They pleaded for her safe return, and the small town of Darden rallied behind them, offering resources, support, and comfort in the midst of an unimaginable tragedy. Yet, despite their best efforts, days turned into weeks, and Holly was still nowhere to be found. One key factor that kept the case in the public eye was the absence of any solid evidence that could explain Holly's disappearance. There were no indications that she had been abducted, no ransom demands, and no sign of violence at her home. This left law enforcement with few leads to pursue, and every theory seemed as likely as the next. The investigators were in the early stages of trying to piece together what happened to Holly, but every lead they followed was met with more uncertainty. The discovery of evidence, a break in the case. After weeks of searching, the case took a shocking turn in May 2011, when human remains were discovered in a wooded area not far from Holly's home. The discovery sparked an avalanche of questions. Was this Holly's body? If so, what had happened to her in the weeks since her disappearance? And if this wasn't Holly, whose remains were they? Authorities moved quickly to identify the remains, and after an agonizing wait, they confirmed that the body found in the woods belonged to Holly Bobo. It was a devastating blow to her family. The hope they had held onto so desperately began to crumble. The young woman who had disappeared without a trace had been taken from them in the most brutal way imaginable. As the investigation shifted to a homicide case, the clues that had been gathered started to take on new significance. New details began to emerge. Witnesses had reported seeing a suspicious vehicle near Holly's home around the time she was abducted, and there were reports that the man Holly had been seen with earlier was not a stranger after all, but someone with ties to the Bobo family's acquaintances. This only deepened the mystery. How could someone with known ties to the family be involved in Holly's disappearance? The suspects, Zachary Adams and Jason Autry's law enforcement continued to investigate. One name began to surface with disturbing frequency: Zachary Adams. He had been known to the authorities as someone with a criminal history, and it quickly became clear that his life would be closely scrutinized. Adams had a history of violence and was known to be involved in local criminal activities. His name had been linked to other suspects in the case, and investigators were starting to believe that he could be the key to understanding what had happened to Holly. In 2014, after 3 long years of mounting suspicion and mounting evidence, Adams was arrested and charged with Holly Bobo's kidnapping and murder. Along with him, Jason Autry, another local man with a history of criminal involvement, was also arrested. Autry, at first, denied any involvement in Holly's death, but was later convinced to cooperate with the authorities. He became a key witness for the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence. Further complicating the case, Adams's arrest marked the beginning of a high-stakes legal battle that would stretch on for years, with both suspects denying the charges and pleading not guilty. The evidence against them, though compelling, was circumstantial at best, and many still believed that the truth about what had happened to Holly Bobo remained hidden. The legal and emotional roller coaster would go on for years, leading to an eventual trial that would capture national attention. The impact, Holly's family, and the long road to justice set throughout the investigation. Holly's family was forced to endure an unimaginable roller coaster of emotions, from the early days of hope and community search efforts to the painful realization that Holly had been murdered. They remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice. The toll this case took on Holly's family was immense, and the legal proceedings added another layer of anguish. Holly's mother, Karen, became an outspoken advocate for her daughter, speaking out publicly and relentlessly pursuing any lead that could bring her daughter's killer to justice. The Bobo family became the face of the missing persons case, and as the years went on, their pain became a national symbol of the agony families face. When someone they love disappears without a trace, despite the intense scrutiny and media attention, the case remained unresolved for years, leading to feelings of helplessness and frustration. But through it all, Holly's family never lost their determination to see justice served. The toll on them was undeniable, but their resolve remained as the case continued. The trial of Zachary Adams and Jason Autry became a focal point of both legal and public interest. The years of waiting, of false leads, and of devastating twists had brought them to this moment finally. The moment where the truth about Holly's death would be brought to light. Conclusion: the road to justice. His long and winding story of Holly Bobo is one of heartbreak, resilience, and a search for justice that lasted years. From the moment of her disappearance to the trials and tribulations that followed, this case captured the hearts and minds of many. It serves as a reminder that no matter how dark and difficult the road to justice may seem, there is always a fight worth fighting. Stay tuned as we continue to delve deeper into the legal battles, the investigation, and the final outcomes of Holly's case in upcoming parts of this series. We'll uncover the emotional journey of Holly's family, the twists and turns of the investigation, and the ultimate quest for closure in a case that shook the nation. Part 2. The investigation unfolds. A long road to justice. The disappearance and murder of Holly Bobo left a trail of unanswered questions and a family desperately seeking answers. But as the investigation continued, the case took several unexpected turns. The early days of the investigation were characterized by a sense of helplessness, with law enforcement struggling to gather solid leads or determine the truth behind Holly's disappearance. Yet, slowly, small pieces of evidence began to surface, leading to new theories and ultimately narrowing down the suspects. The early suspects, shifting theories, and false leads. In the days following Holly's disappearance, law enforcement considered several theories, some of which seemed to make sense at the time, but would later prove to be misguided. One of the early leads pointed to a possible abduction by a stranger. The initial suspect in the case was a man named Terry T.J. McKinney, a man who had a history of criminal behavior and was said to be a person of interest in several other local incidents. McKinney was known to have been in the area around the time Holly went missing, and he was even questioned by police. However, after a thorough investigation, McKinney was cleared of any involvement. His alibi, combined with the lack of physical evidence linking him to the crime, led investigators to abandon the theory that he was Holly's abductor. This development was a major blow to the investigation, as law enforcement had initially hoped that McKinney could provide valuable answers. As a result, the investigation refocused on other potential leads. Despite clearing McKinney, the authorities remained determined to find the person responsible for Holly's abduction. They continued combing through evidence, retracing her steps on the day she disappeared and interviewing neighbors, friends, and family members. But as time went on, the case began to go cold, and the fear of never finding Holly began to weigh heavily on the Bobo family. A break in the case. The arrest of Zachary Adams in 2014. After 3 long years of uncertainty, the case took a significant turn when Zachary Adams, a local man with a criminal background, was arrested in connection with Holly's disappearance. His arrest was the result of months of investigative work and a growing belief among law enforcement that Adams was involved in the crime. Adams, a man in his 30s, had long been a person of interest in the case due to his violent past and connections to other individuals involved in criminal activity in the area. The investigation revealed that Adams had been involved in a range of illegal activities, including drug trafficking, theft, and assault. But it wasn't just his criminal record that raised suspicions. Adams had also been living near Holly's home at the time of her disappearance, and several sources claimed to have seen him near the Bobo household in the days leading up to the incident. More importantly, Adams had a history of violent behavior, which made him a prime suspect in a case involving abduction and murder. The arrest of Zachary Adams was a major breakthrough, but it was far from the end of the story. As the investigation into his involvement deepened, law enforcement began to piece together the chilling details of how Holly's abduction might have unfolded. The role of Jason Autry, a sinister partnership, along with the arrest of Zachary Adams, another key player in the case, emerged. Jason Autry, a man with a long history of criminal activity. Autry was arrested and charged as an accomplice to Holly's abduction and murder after it was revealed that he had been involved in some capacity. According to the prosecution, Autry was a key witness who provided crucial information about the crime. Though his role in the crime itself remained murky for some time, Autry, like Adams, was a local figure known for his violent tendencies and ties to criminal circles. What was shocking, however, was the fact that he had been involved in Holly's case despite not being a direct participant in the abduction. Autry claimed that he was coerced into helping cover up the crime and participate in efforts to hide evidence. In exchange for cooperating with the authorities, Autry was granted a plea deal, reducing his charges and sentencing. His testimony, however, proved pivotal in connecting the dots and revealing a disturbing picture of what had happened to Holly. According to Autry, Holly had been taken by force, and her captors held her against her will for an extended period, before ultimately ending her life. The details of Holly's abduction, what happened that morning. Autry's testimony provided some much-needed insight into what had transpired on the morning of April 13, 2011. According to Autry, Zachary Adams had been stalking Holly and had been planning her abduction for some time. On the day she went missing, Adams allegedly lured her outside by pretending to be someone she knew. As Holly stepped out into the yard, Adams grabbed her and forced her into a vehicle, taking her away from her home against her will. Autry claimed that he was involved in the cover-up, helping to hide Holly's body and dispose of the evidence. He said that Adams, with his violent history, had used fear and intimidation to ensure his silence. But Autry eventually realized the gravity of the situation and began cooperating with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony helped law enforcement put together a clearer timeline of the events. It further implicated Zachary Adams as the mastermind behind the crime. The search for justice. The courtroom. May 2017, Zachary Adams stood trial for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Holly Bobo. The case had become a national sensation, with the media covering every twist and turn. The Bobo family had waited for this moment for years, hoping for justice and closure after the long years of uncertainty. For Holly's parents, Karen and Clint, the trial marked the beginning of a new chapter in their pursuit of answers. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution laid out their case against Zachary Adams. They presented the evidence, including testimonies from key witnesses like Jason Autry, and painted a grim picture of what had happened to Holly. The prosecution argued that Adams had planned and carried out the kidnapping, holding Holly captive before ultimately murdering her. However, Adams maintained his innocence, and his defense team pushed back against the allegations, casting doubt on some of the evidence. The emotional toll on Holly's family was apparent as they sat through each day of the trial, listening to the harrowing details of their daughter's last moments. Their grief was compounded by the drawn-out nature of the proceedings, but their resolve remained strong. They were determined to see justice served for Holly, no matter how long it took. The verdict, a long-awaited moment in March 2017. After a lengthy and emotional trial, Zachary Adams was found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some measure of relief to Holly's family, though no sentence could ever truly bring their daughter back or erase the pain they had endured for so many years. The trial's conclusion didn't mark the end of the saga for the Bobo family. However, Holly's parents continued to honor her memory and worked to keep her story alive, so that no one would forget the young woman who was taken too soon and whose life was tragically cut short by a brutal and senseless crime. The road to healing. Remembering Holly Bobo, though the trial was over and the conviction secured, the Bobo family's journey toward healing was just beginning. The loss of their daughter remained an open wound, but the justice they had long sought was a crucial step forward in the healing process. Holly's story served as a powerful reminder of the importance of perseverance, and it galvanized the community in Tennessee and beyond to continue the fight for justice. For victims of violent crimes, Holly's family, while still grieving, chose to honor her legacy by raising awareness about the dangers of abduction and working to ensure that other families did not experience the same agony they had gone through. Their efforts were not just about justice, but about spreading hope and making sure Holly's memory was never forgotten. Conclusion. The final chapter in Holly's storied case of Holly Bobo is one that will forever be etched in the hearts of those who followed her story. From the heart-wrenching disappearance to the emotional trial and ultimate conviction of Zachary Adams, the journey was a long and painful one. But in the end, Holly's family found justice, and they were able to find peace knowing that her killer was held accountable for his actions. Stay tuned for part 3 of this series, where we explore the aftermath of Holly Bobo's case, the ongoing impact it had on her family, and the lessons learned from this tragic and shocking true crime story. Part 3, the aftermath. The impact of Holly Bobo's case on the community and familiar with Zachary Adams' conviction, and the long-awaited justice for Holly Bobo finally achieved. The Bobo family and the community of Darden, Tennessee, were left to grapple with the fallout of the tragic case. While the guilty verdict provided a sense of closure to many, the trauma and emotional scars left by Holly's disappearance and death would linger, both for her family and the larger community. In this chapter, we delve into the aftermath of the case, the impact it had on the people involved, and the steps the Bobo family has taken to keep Holly's memory alive. A family forever changed, yet the conviction of Zachary Adams brought some sense of justice to Holly's parents, Karen and Clint Bobo, and their extended family. But it was not the end of their pain. For them, The battle to find Holly had been emotionally grueling, a long journey marked by anguish, uncertainty, and hope. Now that the man responsible for her death was behind bars, they faced the difficult task of learning how to live without. Their beloved daughter, Holly's mother, Karen, spoke publicly on several occasions about the toll the case had taken on her health and well-being. After the loss of her daughter, Karen found solace in speaking out about the trauma of losing a child, advocating for victims of abduction, and raising awareness about the importance of supporting families affected by similar tragedies. She became involved in several organizations focused on crime victims' rights, using her own experience to help others navigate the aftermath of violent crimes. Clint Bobo, Holly's father, also became an advocate for victims' families, channeling his grief into making sure that Holly's story was heard. Through interviews and public appearances, he worked tirelessly to remind people that Holly was not just a victim, but a person full of life and potential. Clint's strength, despite the devastating loss, served as an inspiration to others who found themselves in similar situations. Though it was impossible to replace the hole left by Holly's absence, her parents dedicated themselves to honoring her life and legacy. Despite the conviction of Adams, there would be no full closure for the Bobo family. Holly's death would remain a painful memory, and no legal decision could reverse the trauma they had endured. Yet, the ability to speak about her life and legacy, and to see the man responsible for her murder held accountable, provided a sense of justice that helped them begin to heal. Holly's memory remained alive through the Bobo family's advocacy, and they used their platform to help keep the conversation about abductions and violent crime in the public eye. The community's response, the town shaken Darden, Tennessee, a small rural town where Holly Bobo had grown up, was deeply affected by her abduction and murder. As the case unfolded, the community rallied behind Holly's family, offering support, hope, and encouragement. The local law enforcement, though facing immense pressure, worked tirelessly to find answers, and the case became a central focus for many people in the area. When Holly was taken, the sense of security that most of the town had once felt was shattered. The idea that such a heinous crime could happen in their own backyard caused shockwaves throughout the region. Families who had lived in the area for generations began to rethink their own safety, and residents expressed fear that they might fall victim to a similar tragedy. As news of Holly's disappearance spread, there was a growing sense of urgency among locals to find out what had happened, and many people, including volunteers, joined the search efforts to help law enforcement. Though the eventual arrest of Zachary Adams brought some relief, it did not restore the sense of security that had been lost. In the years that followed, people in Darden and the surrounding counties remained affected by the trauma that Holly's case had brought to light. Many wondered if such a crime could happen again in a community they had once considered safe. However, despite the lasting impact of Holly's murder, the case also brought the community together. Residents attended vigils, participated in rallies, and showed an outpouring of support for the Bobo family. These efforts demonstrated the town's resilience and their commitment to ensuring Holly's legacy lived on. The murder and trial sparked conversations in schools, town halls, and churches. As people sought to heal and support each other, a community united in memory of Holly's death sparked a larger conversation about crime prevention and victim advocacy. In Tennessee, while Holly was the victim of an incredibly tragic and violent crime, her case brought much-needed attention to the issue of abductions and the rights of victims' families. Holly's family worked hard to ensure that their daughter's story was used to educate others about how to prevent such tragedies. In the years following the conviction of Zachary Adams, the Bobo family helped raise funds for local victims of crime and for programs aimed at reducing domestic violence and abductions. They also worked closely with law enforcement to ensure that missing persons cases were treated with the urgency and attention they deserved. They wanted to make sure that what happened to Holly would not be forgotten and that future victims would receive the justice they were entitled to. One of the most heartwarming tributes to Holly's memory came in the form of the Holly Bobo Foundation, which her family helped establish. The foundation's mission was to provide resources and support for missing persons cases, raise awareness about domestic violence and abduction prevention, and offer assistance to families affected by similar tragedies. By establishing the foundation, the Bobo family hoped to turn their heartbreak into something positive that could help others. In Holly's name, Holly's story lives on, a lasting legacy. Though Holly Bobo's life was tragically cut short, her legacy has continued to inspire others. Her case brought to light the importance of community involvement, law enforcement vigilance, and family advocacy in cases of abductions. Holly's family has made it their mission to use their grief to help other families avoid the same pain, and they remain vocal advocates for victims' rights and the prevention of similar crimes. Holly's memory is kept alive not only through her family's efforts, but also through the ongoing work of the Holly Bobo Foundation and the support of the community. The case of Holly Bobo serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of keeping loved ones safe. The heartbreak that Holly's family has endured will never be fully healed, but through their continued efforts to honor her, they ensure that her story is never forgotten. Conclusion: the continuing fight for justice's story of Holly Bobo is one that will stay with us all. It is a story marked by unimaginable tragedy, but also by the perseverance and strength of a family who refused to let their daughter's life and death be in vain. From the heart-wrenching search for Holly to the courtroom drama that ultimately convicted her killer, the case has had far-reaching consequences for her family, the town of Darden, and the broader community. While Holly's life was tragically taken, her story remains a powerful symbol of resilience, hope, and justice. The Bobo family's commitment to ensuring Holly's memory lives on through their advocacy and charitable work is a testament to their strength in the face of unimaginable loss. Holly's legacy is one of courage and determination, and her family's work continues to make a difference for those affected by similar tragedies. In the end, the case of Holly Bobo reminds us all of the importance of never giving up the fight for justice. Even when the odds seem insurmountable, Holly may no longer be with us, but the lessons learned from her case will continue to resonate, ensuring that her story and the lessons of her tragic death are not forgotten. Part 4. The long-term impact and ongoing search for justice's story of Holly Bobo's abduction and murder does not end with the conviction of Zachary Adams. Though the Bobo family finally saw the person responsible for their daughter's death held accountable, the larger questions of justice, healing, and closure continue to resonate deeply within the community and the broader public. While Holly's case has been labeled a victory for justice, it also highlighted the flaws and limitations within the criminal justice system, especially when it comes to missing persons and unsolved crimes. Holly's family, along with advocates for victims of violent crimes, continue to push for reforms and improvements to the processes used to address cases like hers. These issues, once brought to the forefront through Holly's tragic story, continue to have a ripple effect across the nation. The ripple effect changes to law enforcement and criminal justice. Holly Bobo's case not only captured the attention of Tennessee, but also ignited national conversations around how missing persons and violent crimes are handled. The lack of immediate resolution in Holly's case had many wondering whether the system had failed her and her family. The amount of time it took to arrest and charge the culprit despite evidence and suspicion surrounding Zachary Adams early on raised serious concerns about the resources allocated to missing persons cases, particularly those involving young women. Following Holly's disappearance, the investigation led by local, state, and federal law enforcement was complex and at times frustratingly slow. Holly's family and advocates began calling for more effective communication and collaboration between agencies. They also pushed for better tracking systems and a more transparent approach to solving such cases. The Bobo family used their platform to call for reforms in how abductions are treated, particularly in rural communities. They worked with lawmakers to push for more comprehensive resources for law enforcement and victim advocacy groups, with greater focus on the lessons learned from Holly's case. Many states have reevaluated their response protocols for abduction and missing persons cases, with a focus on improving the speed of investigation and ensuring families are kept informed. Advocacy and continued education. The Holly Bobo Foundation has beat the pain and trauma. The Bobo family has turned their loss into a continued commitment to prevent such horrors from happening to others. Through the Holly Bobo Foundation, they have been able to provide support for victims' families and bring attention to the issues of abduction and sexual violence. The foundation serves as a platform to honor Holly's memory while providing resources for those affected by similar tragedies. The foundation works on a variety of initiatives, including funding search efforts for missing persons, providing emotional support to victims' families, and educating the public about the importance of staying vigilant in communities. With the support of both local and national organizations, the Holly Bobo Foundation has become a powerful force in the fight to prevent further crimes and ensure victims' voices are heard. One of their key efforts is advocating for stronger laws and protections for individuals who are at risk of abduction, as well as ensuring that more resources are allocated towards solving cold cases. Their advocacy also includes raising awareness about the long-lasting effects of violent crimes on families, with a focus on improving support systems for those impacted by trauma. Through these efforts, Holly's legacy continues to evolve. Holly's family, in the wake of their devastating loss, has ensured that her death was not in vain by pushing for systemic changes and raising awareness of the dangers of violence and abduction. By continuing to speak out on behalf of victims, they are making a lasting impact on society and ensuring that Holly's memory will always remain part of the fight for justice. The healing journey, Holly's family and their continued advocacy. Although the legal battles are now over, the Bobo family's emotional journey is far from complete. The conviction of Zachary Adams gave them the closure they had long sought. But the healing process for the Bobo family is one that will continue throughout their lives. Clint and Karen Bobo, Holly's parents, have faced unimaginable grief since their daughter's abduction in 2011. In the aftermath of the trial, they have found ways to cope with their loss by focusing on the positive aspects of Holly's life, including the impact she made on her community and the love she shared with her family. Holly's mother, Karen, has made it clear that she will continue to honor Holly's memory, not just through the foundation, but also by speaking out on behalf of victims of violence and abduction. She has dedicated herself to working with other families who have been affected by similar tragedies, helping them navigate their pain and find support. Despite the deep sorrow, Clint and Karen Bobo's strength and determination to keep fighting for justice on behalf of their daughter is nothing short of inspiring. They know that Holly's memory lives on not just in the case that finally found justice, but in the lives they touched through their continued work with the foundation and their commitment to preventing such violence from affecting other families. The search for lasting justice. The role of law enforcement in Holly's case was not only a fight for justice for the Bobo family, but also a turning point for law enforcement and the way they respond to violent crimes in rural areas. The intense media coverage surrounding the trial revealed the challenges faced by local law enforcement agencies when investigating cases that draw national attention. The public pressure placed on law enforcement during Holly's disappearance was immense, and it highlighted the critical need for proper training, resources, and communication in these high-profile cases. The case also brought to light the importance of collaboration between local, state, and federal agencies. The joint effort between agencies in Tennessee and the FBI during Holly's investigation became a model for future cases, showing how crucial interagency cooperation can be in solving crimes that have multiple complexities. While the process was slow and much of the evidence was circumstantial, the eventual conviction of Zachary Adams demonstrated the success of these collaborative efforts. Still, Holly's case revealed the cracks in the system. Many critics have pointed out that the Bobo family's case was handled with urgency once the national spotlight was on it, but for many families dealing with similar situations, the attention and resources are not always as readily available. As a result, Holly's case continues to serve as a reminder of the need for ongoing advocacy for better law enforcement practices and more resources for families of missing persons. Conclusion: the enduring legacy of Holly Bobo's case of Holly Bobo has forever changed the lives of those who knew her, the law enforcement agencies that investigated her case, and the community that supported her family. While Holly's life was tragically cut short, her legacy lives on through the efforts of her family, the work of the Holly Bobo Foundation, and the awareness it raised about the need for better responses to abduction cases. The trial, conviction, and aftermath of Holly Bobo's case were not just about finding justice for one family. They were about recognizing the larger systemic issues that plague the criminal justice system. The lessons learned from her case continue to shape the way law enforcement handles missing persons, and the push for stronger laws and protections for victims is a cause that will persist. In the end, Holly Bobo's legacy is a lasting reminder of the impact one life can have, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy. She will never be forgotten, and her family's tireless efforts to honor her memory will ensure that she is always remembered. What are your thoughts on the legacy of Holly Bobo and the impact her case had on law enforcement and the public's understanding of abduction and violent crime? Do you believe the justice system responded appropriately in this case, or do changes need to be made? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Room 57 for more deep dives into true crime stories that continue to shape our world. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the dark and complex world of criminal justice, one story at a time.